According to the National Institute on Aging, more than 60% of people over the age of 65 admit they struggle to remember names of loved ones, recent conversations, or even why they just walked into a room. The question is, why does memory begin to fade like that as we grow older? And is there a way to preserve the most important part of ourselves, our memories, our stories, and the connections that make us who we are? Many people turn to supplements in hopes of improving their memory, but more than 40% of them are unknowingly using them the wrong way. This often leads to sleep problems, increased anxiety, and even irregular heart rhythms. The story you are about to hear is the journey of an 85-year-old man living in California who once believed his memory was gone forever. But thanks to one small morning habit, he found clarity again, restored his sense of connection, and most importantly, began to feel like himself once more. If you are over 60, please stay with us through this story. It may change the way you care for your health every day. And which country are you watching from? Leave a comment below. At first, everything happened quietly. I would forget why I walked into the kitchen. Sometimes I was about to grab something, then just stood there looking around, my mind completely blank, as if the thought had been blown away. I comforted myself, thinking that everyone goes through this at some point. But then those moments stopped being occasional. They came every day. One time, my granddaughter ran up to hug me, and it took me a few seconds to remember her name. When I picked up a book to read, I had to go over the same paragraph 3 times and still could not grasp the meaning. It felt like my mind was slowly dimming, like a flickering light just before it goes out. Daytime became long stretches of silence. Nighttime was filled with questions that had no answers. Who am I if I can no longer remember the things I once cherished? Memory is not just the ability to recall. It is a part of who we are, our choices, our relationships, our past, and even our future. When I lost my memory, I did not just forget objects or conversations. I lost my connection to myself. One day, I told my granddaughter a story from my youth. She smiled and gently said, "Grandpa, you told me this story yesterday." I smiled back, pretending I remembered, but deep down, it hurt. I truly did not know. I had already said it. Slowly, I began to avoid long conversations. I was afraid of losing my train of thought halfway through, afraid of having to apologize for not remembering what I was saying, afraid of opening a drawer and not knowing what I was looking for, afraid that one day I would not recognize my loved ones. But what scared me the most was not the forgetting itself. It was the feeling that I was slowly disappearing from life. I started keeping quiet more often, pretending everything was fine, and that only made me feel more alone than ever. Then one afternoon, just like any other, I happened to hear something that changed everything. I remember very clearly the day I decided I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. It was when I stood in the middle of my bedroom, staring at an open drawer, completely unsure of what I had come there to get. I sat down on the bed, my hands trembling slightly, then called to make an appointment with my family doctor, saying out loud what I had been hiding for so long was not easy. We often believe we can handle it, that we can manage on our own, but at some point, you have to admit that something inside you is slowly slipping away. The doctor was a man about the same age as my son. He spoke gently, asked many questions, then gave me a few simple tests for memory. Focus and language, I tried my best, but there were questions where I hesitated and others I could not answer at all. The doctor did not seem alarmed, but the look in his eyes told me I was no longer normal the way I used to be. At the end of the visit, he said, There are no clear signs of Alzheimer's or severe dementia, but you may be experiencing a common condition called mild cognitive impairment. The phrase sounded gentle, almost harmless, but inside me, it stirred a quiet storm. The doctor advised me to keep my mind active, dot crossword puzzles, read books, and stay socially connected. He also talked about sleep, daily movement, reducing stress, and watching for any signs of worsening. I asked if there was any medicine that could help. He shook his head. There are medications available, but the effects are unclear, and they may cause side effects. I do not recommend them. I left the clinic with mixed feelings. A part of me was relieved that it was not something more serious, but deeper down, I felt disappointed, as if everything I had just heard was another way of saying, just accept getting older. But I did not want to simply manage. I wanted to live fully, to remember, to talk, to write, to listen, and to be myself again. And that was when I decided to start looking in my own way, not searching for miracles, but starting with the most basic thing of all, what I eat each day. The first food was blueberries. I no longer believed in miracles. But that afternoon, when I happened to open a video on YouTube, I heard a sentence that made me pause. A retired neurologist said, food does not just feed the body, it nourishes the memory. She emphasized that there was no need for expensive medications or strange formulas. All it takes is choosing the right foods at the right time and sticking with it consistently. Among the foods she mentioned, one kept coming up again and again, blueberries. I used to walk past the fruit aisle at the supermarket and glance at those tiny, deep purple boxes of blueberries without much interest. But after that day, I began to look into them. It turns out that blueberries contain a special group of antioxidants called anthocyanins. The very compounds that give them their rich blue-purple color, these substances do more than fight free radicals in the body. They have a powerful effect on nerve cells in the brain. According to a study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry, older adults who consumed blueberries daily for 12 weeks showed significant improvements in short-term memory and learning. Another study by the University of Exeter in the United Kingdom found that blueberry juice can increase blood flow to the brain and improve cognitive function in seniors. I did not need to hear more. The next day, I bought a box of fresh blueberries. I did not expect much. I simply mixed a small handful into plain yogurt each morning, quietly starting a new habit. The first week went by without anything noticeable, but by the second week, I began to notice I woke up feeling more alert. I no longer spent too long looking for my reading glasses. The stories I wanted to tell my grandchildren were no longer interrupted by lost thoughts. I remember one morning, while folding clothes, my grandchild called and asked for her mother's phone number. Normally, I would need to grab my notebook and look it up, but that day, I answered immediately as if the number had never left my memory. It was just a small moment, but I remember it clearly because I knew something inside me was starting to brighten again. From just a handful of berries each day, I began to feel that I could come back, not exactly the way I used to be, but myself, clear enough to talk, to care, to live fully in each moment. And I knew if such a simple fruit could make that kind of difference, there must be more out there I had yet to try. The second food was avocados, nuts, and healthy fats. After blueberries, I began to pay more attention to what I ate, not just at breakfast, but throughout the entire day. Before that, I used to eat just to feel full, out of habit, never thinking about eating in a way that nourishes the memory. But then I came across an article from Harvard Health Publishing. It said that more than 60% of the human brain is made up of fat, and that healthy fats are the fuel that helps keep us sharp, focused, and able to remember as we grow older. That truly surprised me. For decades, I had been avoiding fat. I believed that fat was harmful, that it would raise cholesterol and weaken my heart. I had removed everything like avocados, nuts, and plant-based oils from my diet, but I never imagined that doing so may have quietly harmed my brain, the very thing that needed nourishment the most. I decided to try again. Gently, without forcing anything, I bought a few ripe avocados, small but firm. Each day, I ate half of one. Sometimes I spread it on whole grain toast and added a bit of lemon juice. Other times I chopped it up and mixed it with tomatoes, red onion, and a small spoon of olive oil. On some days, I blended it with banana and almond milk into a smooth and heart-healthy shake. Avocado did more than make me feel comfortably full. It gave me a sense of satisfaction. My body felt more alive, no longer sluggish after meals. I noticed my mind felt clearer and lighter, as if someone had gently lifted the fog that had lingered in my head for so long. Then I moved on to nuts, specifically walnuts and almonds. Each morning, I added a small handful to my yogurt along with blueberries. On some days, I packed a little bag to bring with me during my afternoon walk. Walnuts look like tiny brains. That made me smile. But it turns out it is not just a coincidence. Walnuts contain omega-3s, antioxidants, vitamin A, and polyphenols, all proven to help protect neurons, strengthen connections between brain cells, and improve short-term memory in older adults. Almonds are gentler but steady, rich in monounsaturated fats, protein, and magnesium. They provide clean energy the brain can use whenever it needs to. I began to remember details that had been asleep for decades. One day, while sitting with my grandchild, I suddenly recalled the full name of my fourth grade teacher. Then out of nowhere, I found myself humming a childhood song we used to sing every Monday morning in class. My grandchild looked at me with surprise. I held back tears because I knew that memory had never really disappeared. It had only been waiting to be awakened. And the wonderful thing was, people around me began to notice the change too. My daughter said, "Dad seemed quicker lately," and even happier. My grandchild gave me a big hug and whispered, "I love hearing your stories like before." I did not need anything more, not because I had become exceptional, but because I was becoming myself again. I did not eat too much. Just a small handful each day, 5 walnuts, a few almonds, evenly spread. But that consistency, that simple kindness to my body each morning made all the difference. And from that moment on, I stopped fearing the word fat. I only feared not loving my body in the right way. Avocados, nuts, and healthy fats are not magic. But to me, they are the fuel that rekindled my memory, helping me wake up each day without worrying about what I might forget. The third food was dark chocolate. For many years, I had almost completely cut sweets out of my diet. I believed that if I wanted to stay healthy, I had to give up sugar, give up candy, and give up all the things that brought me comfort. I used to think that in order to live a long life, I had to be so strict with myself that there was no room left for enjoyment. But one day, while reading an article by an older nutrition expert from Tufts University, I came across something that made me rethink. She said that dark chocolate, if used properly, could become a wonderful ally for memory, not the sweet, milky kind we often eat, but the pure variety with at least 70% cacao, Cacao contains a powerful group of antioxidants called flavonoids. These compounds help increase blood flow to the brain, reduce inflammation, and protect nerve cells from damage over time. Not only that, cacao also stimulates the body to produce serotonin and endorphins, two chemicals that can help you feel happier, more focused, and less stressed throughout the day. I decided to begin with the smallest step. Each day after lunch, I gave myself a quiet moment. I held a small piece of dark chocolate and let it melt slowly in my mouth, without rushing, without distraction. At first, I just wanted to see if it would make any difference. But within a few days, I noticed something. The afternoons no longer felt sluggish. I could read a book without flipping back to find where I had left off. I began writing my thoughts down again in a notebook. Then one afternoon, while sitting with my grandchildren, they asked me if I remembered any old fairy tales that their great-grandmother used to tell. Without needing to think, I began telling one of those stories in full. It was a story I thought I had lost long ago, but right there, in the middle of their laughter, I told it as if my mother had just whispered it to me that very moment. I had not just remembered it, I had relived a very real part of my past. And from just one small piece of chocolate, I learned that sweetness is not the enemy. As long as we choose the right moment, the right kind, and maintain balance, then joy and health can absolutely go hand in hand. The fourth food was water. I used to think that water was just water. Drink when you're thirsty. Drink with meals. Sometimes forget to drink at all. There were days when I only had a few sips in the entire morning, then didn't remember to drink again until late in the afternoon. But no one had ever told me that water plays such a vital role in memory. It wasn't until I read a study from Tufts University that I was truly startled. The article explained that nearly 3/4 of the human brain is made up of water, and that even mild dehydration can make you feel sluggish, reduce your ability to focus, and weaken your memory. I began to notice that the days I was forgetful, tired in the afternoon, or mentally slow were almost always the days I drank very little water. That's when I realized that if I wanted to nourish my memory, water had to be the first thing I paid attention to, not something fancy or expensive, just a glass of plain water in the morning. I started to change with the simplest habit. Each morning after waking up, I drank a large glass of water. Before breakfast, I drank another half glass. I always carried a bottle of water with me and placed it somewhere easy to see. I did not wait until I was thirsty to drink. I reminded myself to take a few sips every hour, even just a little. At first, it felt unfamiliar, but then my body began to respond. I felt more awake in the morning, no longer groggy or disoriented. I read more smoothly and could remember the names of book characters that I used to mix up. My mouth no longer felt dry, and the small headaches I used to get each afternoon began to fade. What surprised me most was that water not only helped clear my mind, but it also softened my mood. I was less irritable, and the unexplained fatigue became less frequent. Another thing I noticed was that the healthy foods I was eating daily, like avocado, blueberries, and nuts, started to show even more noticeable effects when I drank enough water. That's because the body can only absorb nutrients well when its inner environment is clean and well circulated. Water helps carry oxygen and nutrients to every cell, especially the brain cells. I also began drinking gentle options like unsweetened green tea or rosemary tea, but the foundation of it all was still plain water. In a world where people often look for distant and complicated solutions, I learned that the most powerful thing sometimes comes from the simplest act: a glass of water, a steady sip, a lasting habit, And from there, my memory began to feel refreshed each day. No longer dry, no longer fading. When I began changing from the smallest things, I did not expect my memory to improve. So noticeably, I only hope to feel a little more alert, to be able to recall a number, a name, or an old memory more easily. But what I received was more than I ever expected. I felt like I was living again, not just remembering. I began to sleep better, speak more naturally, and most importantly, feel more connected with my children and grandchildren every morning with blueberries, half an avocado, a few walnuts, a piece of dark chocolate, and a glass of water. I no longer felt like I was racing against time. Instead, I felt like my body was slowly finding its rhythm again. The persistence in these simple habits transformed my mind in a deep and lasting way. The most important thing I learned was that you do not need to do something grand. All it takes is offering a little kindness to your body each day, eating the right foods, drinking enough water, and staying consistent with a new rhythm. Your body will find its way to restore itself. Health after 60 is not something lost. It is something that can still be nurtured every single day. If you are entering a stage of life full of changes, do not give up. Start with one small habit, a glass of water, a handful of nuts, a smile. And if you found this story helpful, do not forget to subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking this journey together. Share your story in the comments. You never know, your words might bring hope to someone who needs it most right now.